Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined as always by Derek Brissett. Derek, it's the first round of Major League Rugby, the
Hmm.
first one since 2018 not to feature a Canadian team
Oh
in
gosh.
the competition.
Wow. Way to
It's
bring the show down right off the top, man.
yeah, I know it's a bit bittersweet to
Ah,
say because it's not as though there haven't been any Canadian performances this weekend.
yeah. No, there were some unreal Canadian performances, and we shall get into it. I mean, ultimately, though, it's a pretty unreal weekend for rugby in North America. Because I mean,
Mhm.
we had, in like multiple codes as well. Because we had
Yeah.
obviously these seven series, right? Back-to-back events or back-to-back event weekends. Vancouver last week, LA this week, MLR round one, which is always exciting. It always kind of every year MLR kind of it always feels like a little bit of a blank slate, like you're kind of anticipating who's going to surprise you, who might surprise you in a bad way as well. But then also like, the two new teams coming in the league, Miami and Anthem, LA being a relocated team as well. A bit of a chaotic off season, but all the players have kind of landed in their new homes and seem like they're all kind of ready to go. So it's exciting to get, the first week of MLR season off. And then, to kind of top it all off too, the NRL had a pretty big event in Las Vegas. So no
Yeah.
matter what code of rugby you watch, it was pretty great this weekend, man. Like, what did you get up to? What were you able to kind of tune into? I know you're doing a bit of a reno on the house, so
Yeah,
I
so
hope that didn't get in the way of the rugby watching abilities too
I
much.
tr I try to watch as much as I could, obviously, with the seventh events taking place on the West Coast, not really a
Yeah.
favorable time period to be watching. Likewise, that meant the Seattle and LA hosted
Yeah.
games were, a bit too late of the day for
LA's
me
was
to
way too.
get. Um, but I did catch the highlights afterwards, and
Yeah.
great to see certain Canadians performing well.
Guys,
Um,
guys were unreal.
yeah. But speaking of Canada as a whole, we'll take you back to last week when we got the announcement that there had been the men's schedule so far for 2023, with the announcement of the Pacific Nations Cup. That means we have a number of games guaranteed for the men's team this year. That includes the game against Japan at BC Place in Vancouver on August 25th. A week later, August 31st, it'll be in the USA to play the USA at Dignity Health Sports Park. And then we have a 2 week break. That's when the USA play Japan, and we finally determine where the ranking positions are going to be. And it is guaranteed that Canada will be playing a game either on September 13th or 14th in Tokyo. Their opposition will obviously be determined from the pool of Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga. And if Canada finish in the top two in the pool, that means they'll either get to go to the grand final or the bronze final, and that'll be held on September 21st or 22nd in Osaka. And so at least 3 games from the Pacific Nations Cup, maybe 4. That is to be seen. But before all that, we have a couple of games in July. On July 6th is at TD Place against Scotland, and that is for the Douglas Horn Cup. For those of you that may be unaware, the Douglas Horn Cup is a trophy that is determined between Scotland and Canada, and it is named after the father of Alan Horn and has been contested since 2008. And for those of you wondering who is Alan Horn, Alan Horn sadly passed away in January of 2023. He was known as a stalwart of Canadian rugby, a titan in Canada's communications industry, and very well loved by members. He was 71 when he was passed. He was born in Scotland in 1951, and through his efforts with communication, he helped with the sponsorship of the Douglas Horn Cup, who played rugby in Scotland, and obviously his son emigrating to Canada. The cup is named in his honor. And and to be honest, I think Scotland they've got the Calcutta Cup. I think they've got enough cups in their trophy cabinet at the moment. I think they need to make space. Obviously, they're going to be hankering to try and get like the Six Nations trophy. And if they could make any space, I think the Douglas Horn Cup should be coming to Canada and should be, staying in Canada for the time being.
Yeah.
We don't want to clutter the trophy cabinet at all, do we? No, we want to make sure that they have room for all their trophies they're going to be getting. I think it's just fair that Canada put on their best team and, they make sure that there's space for the Douglas Horn Cup. I think that's just, you know, fair and reasonable for everyone involved.
Scotland,
Um,
the other option that Scotland could have is to not make every game that they play in a cup.
that is true. Maybe that's how they eventually end up winning the World Cup. They just name another the Webb Ellis Cup or the Webb Ellis Trophy or something like whichever one it isn't on the World Cup, and just be
They
like,
can have
see, well, we won this one. It was for when we played Tunisia that one time. See,
yeah.
we won.
Oh,
It's
that
all fine.
one's that's Cuisine Solutions Cup too. So
Right.
that's
Well,
that's
it's
the
up to
second
Scotland to
version
find
of
a nation to try. But if you're in Ottawa and you're like, one game's fine, but I could really do with another game. Good news is that 6 days later, on July the 12th, which I believe is a Friday, is that Canada will be hosting Romania. Um, I don't believe there's a cup named after this encounter, but it's a good matchup to have going along. Romania, I believe, are currently going to be playing for third in the Rugby Europe Championship. So
yeah.
I think they're playing off against Spain. Now, we know that Spain beat Canada in 2023 and 2022, so that should put Romania roughly on the same level as Canada. I think this is probably going to be the most interesting matchup for the men's team this year. Of course, we're just saying this with
Uh,
no knowledge of what's happening in the fall. So it may be that Canada gets a couple more games later this year, but we can only confirm that these are the 5 games guaranteed for the men's schedule at the moment.
I would argue that the USA game is the most interesting game because that's always you get the North American rivalry, the fact
That's
that
the most
all
intense.
sorry.
But I say that's the most intense game, and it's like I say Romania is more interesting because it's not a frequent occurrence.
Yeah,
But
it's
obviously,
maybe not a frequent occurrence, but it's like I think this is like both Canada and the USA are going to be two nations that are missed out on the World Cup and are going to be trying to get back to it. And like the immediate team that they have to beat is each other. Like it's a very
yeah.
unique World Rugby situation. So like this is going to be like Canada's going to have 3 games before they meet the USA to like, that's your measuring stick and
Yeah.
stuff or to get ready for it. Right. And then like when you play USA, I think that's the real, like, that's going to be like the real measuring stick for like both countries. And I mean, now all these guys are playing together now too, right? Because there's no
Yeah.
arrows. So like they're all kind of spread out throughout the MLR on the same team. So, that's going to mean a little bit more to them. But also like if you want to hear a better opinion on it than just mine and Stu's, you can listen to last week's episode where Lucas Rumball kind of gives his rundown of the entire Rugby Canada men's schedule and what he makes of it, what he's looking forward to for Rugby Canada in 2024 as they, kind of look to rebuild the program, build some depth, as he said, and climb back up the World Rugby standings.
And you can find that episode on our website, larougerugby.ca. Now, we talked about the men's schedule, but let's talk about the women's schedule because we already know that the Pacific Four Series is happening in April and May of this year. April 27th is versus the USA,
Mhm.
May 11th versus Australia, and May 19th versus New Zealand. Now, obviously, Canada did hosting duties last time around, so they are the away team for all of these games.
Yeah.
However, it was also been announced last week that Canada have won the hosting duties for WXV1, and they will be taking those into BC. So the press release includes this interesting wording. Select games will be held in Vancouver at BC Place Stadium, marking the first time Vancouver's world-class venue has hosted an international women's rugby fixture. So, this is obviously very impressive, historical occasion with BC Place hosting women's 15s games. But interesting to note is that these games will be taking place September 27th to 29th, October 4th to 6th, and again on October 11th to 13th. Now, obviously, that is also in the middle of the CFL season and the MLS season. So games will have to be played around like the Whitecaps schedule against the BC Lions. Um, it shouldn't interfere with the Grey Cup because I believe that will be held in November. But
This is just called planning. You can the
yeah,
CFL has a schedule that's out. You can work around it. It's called
yeah,
planning.
so
You can just
yeah,
plan.
but
Easy.
in the same way of like seeing how this all comes together, I know that when it was the Pacific Four series last year, and Canada were playing their game against Australia. That was held on a Friday, and that's because it was a Alouettes game.
Yeah.
Uh, no, sorry, Red Blacks game.
Yeah, I got a while. Yeah.
I think Red Blacks versus the Alouettes. Um,
So
so that's why I was
so you were
confusing.
right either way then.
Yes,
Yeah.
just I was technically correct, which is the most important correct. Um, but yeah, so that so this is actually keeping in touch with what Rugby Canada set out in their strategic plan of hosting multiple big events
Yeah.
throughout the year. So, we have three men's games that are being hosted in Canada. We have three women's games that are being hosted in Canada. Obviously, this uh, isn't going to be something that happens every year. For example, next year it's the Women's World Cup in England, so there's going to be no games held in Canada in that time period. The
No,
Pacific
no
Four series.
WXV
Well, yeah,
game.
yeah, know what I mean. Canada have already qualified for it for the World Cup, so
Yeah.
should be fine. Um, Speaking of World Cup qualification, we still do not know what World Rugby's plan is for the Americas qualification, if it's going to be continued as a combination of RAN and SAR
Yeah.
as Americas, or if they're going to divide it with the increased number of participants from 20 to 24. But when we know, we will let you know.
'Cause, um, either way, like I think it's pretty awesome that, like you kind of said, right? Like part of the World Rugby initiative or the things that they kind of laid out in that strategic plan was, hosting more events. Both Sophie de Goody and even Lucas Rumball on our show last week were talking about we've constantly mentioned how they keep talking about like the importance of just playing games and getting like a regular schedule, something and like understanding when the test matches are going to happen, who you're going to play. So it's great to see this. It's really cool because this is like obviously WXV outside of the World Cup seems like is like the biggest women's tournament in World Rugby now, right? And
Yeah.
so it's like outside of the World Cup, it's that, and it's really cool that it's being hosted in Canada, and Vancouver, BC, or BC as a whole, I guess, because they definitely imply that there's going to be other stadiums in BC that are going to be used for games. I'm assuming that's going to be, the one in Langford at the Al Sharon High Performance Center and everything. But I think
Mm.
I think it's just a great thing to have like, world class World Rugby events happening in North America, right? So I think that's great for, Canada and the USA. And it's, obviously it's going to, culminate in a few years when the USA host the World Cup in 2031. But, it's great to see that World Rugby seems to be like they're starting to look towards North America, right? We already got like, you know, the Sevens tour cut a whole bunch of events. Vancouver and LA stayed, right? And then, WXVs in Canada. We already know the World Cups in the USA. So it's great to see that World Rugby is looking to North America as like a place to be hosting major events, right? In both Canada and the USA too, right? Not even just favoring one country. one country, Canada and the USA, are both getting, some love from World Rugby as far as a hosting venue is concerned, which is
Yeah.
great. I did love the initial post that just showed a picture of the beautiful Vancouver skyline featuring famous, landmarks such as the CN Tower and the Sky Dome, and that was
Boy.
great. Shout out to Curry Hitchborn, James Dealey, and Rugby Jeff on Twitter. We had a little bit of fun with posting all the other, some other monuments throughout Canada that are definitely not in Vancouver. Up until World Rugby decided to take down that post and actually put up a picture of Vancouver. So that was a lot of fun. That was the most fun I think I had regarding this announcement, other than the fact that it is just really cool that Canada's hosting such a major tournament, and look forward to watching it. It gives maybe get an excuse to go out to Vancouver in October, which is
Yeah.
a lovely time of year to go out to Vancouver if you've never done it.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see that WXV is being taken seriously. And, there's obviously still some things they're trying to work out with the products itself because, as Dave said, there's between levels 2 and 3, there's promotion and relegation. At the moment, WXV1 does not, but it is going to be included from 2026 onwards.
World Rugby does weird things.
Yeah,
Let's
it's
yeah,
fine.
let's
Yeah.
call it spade a spade. Does
Yeah.
weird.
Either way, but it's great to have like regular competition, as we said, like last year, even with their games against England and South Africa, Canada's women had the most matches they have outside of a World Cup with 9. And
Mhm.
you know, I think one big benefit now is that with the Women's Six Nations, and it looks like the WXV, not sorry, the Pacific Four Series being held roughly at the same time, we can then get the understanding of who's going to be in WXV1, who's going to be in WXV2, so on and so forth. And then outside of those competitions, we can set up like friendlies, like the games against Canada and England
Yeah.
last year before they headed down to New Zealand. So, you know, Canada, as we said, has already qualified for the 2025 World Cup. And it's basically from the Pacific Four Series between the USA and Australia of who qualifies automatically for that. And then a case of the other team finishing high enough in WXV2
Mm.
to qualify. Um, so
Should be
I
fun.
think I think Canada and France should try and get a couple of games done this summer before France head over for. Well, I say that expecting that France comes over for their games for WXV1 in September and October. But this is me being presumptuous. I have no idea if that's actually going to come to pass, but we will find out
More,
hopefully
more games
in
are always better.
yeah. All right. So, well, that's all fine and dandy for the 15s, but let's move on to the sevens, or should I say sevens? Because as we mentioned at the top of the show, we have had back-to-back tournaments, but held in Vancouver and Los Angeles. Um, let's talk about the women first. Let's start on something positive. So
Keep it rolling with the positive vibes here.
yeah, we're getting positive
Yeah.
vibes. We'll dwell on negativity later.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, fantastic performance by the women across both tournaments. Yeah, I think
Sophie the
it was.
Goody making the
But yeah, Sophie de
seamless
Goody returning for
transition.
sevens.
Yeah.
Um, and then some guy called Antoine Dupont basically just trying to tug on her coattails and, oh, I want to be in the sevens for the Olympics as well. It's like, yeah, Sophie's already got this sorted. Fine, Antoine,
Antoine
you can.
Dupont's no Sophie de Goody, man. It's
Yeah,
very
and
clear.
no one is, no one is. But no,
Well, he
fantastic.
did win. He did win though, so
Uh, yeah, he won one. If he was as good as Sophie de Goody, he would have won both, but he didn't.
yeah.
So
Unfortunately, Sophie de Goody didn't technically win anything.
no, well,
But you
she
know
won
what?
bronze.
In today's day and age, though, who lets facts get in the way of making a point on a
Exactly.
podcast, right? Like,
Exactly.
in today's day and age, we don't need facts to have a podcast and to make points. So yeah,
We know
um,
who's best in the world.
yeah,
It's
and also yeah, and also
we don't
Canada
need
won. Canada won.
resources or statistics to back up our points. Anyway, but fantastic performance.
Yeah,
Uh, Unfortunately, the women fell in the semi-final against New Zealand in both tournaments.
yeah,
Having home field advantage did wonders for them as they were able to edge past Australia, ensuring that they got the bronze medal. Unfortunately, home advantage also applies to the United States in the bronze final in Los Angeles, with Canada finishing fourth. But ultimately, they have been doing incredibly. They're currently fifth in the sevens rankings on 62 points. They are
yeah,
34 points clear from the elimination. I think they're still like 20 points ahead of sixth place. So, they're pretty secure in where they need to be. And, we've still got two tournaments to go, Hong Kong and Singapore, before the big final in Madrid. Yeah, a really great performance for both of them. Congratulations to um, all the players on the women's sevens.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's really building up the hype as we look
Yeah.
forward to that final in Madrid, as well as the Olympics coming up later this year. Can't really say the same about the men's sevens.
Yeah, a bit of a man, bit of a tough go finishing 12th in Vancouver, which is the home tournament,
Yeah,
and finishing 12th in LA. I
yeah, it's
it's tough. Um, Honestly, like I don't know. The only I feel like the only like, if there's a silver lining here right now, obviously like it's tough because it's like you're going to the repechage tournament. And
yeah,
it's like at least South Africa also sucked the past two weekends. Or whatever. Like
yeah,
South Africa finished 11th. Like Canada had to play South Africa for the 11th place game, right?
yeah. It
So that's maybe a bit of a silver lining, is it's like they're not exactly rolling. But on the other hand, too, Great Britain got silver before losing to Anton Dupont, right?
Yeah. Well,
Um,
to me, it's been a strange mix of
yeah,
results for the repechage teams. I mean, Spain, I think they
yeah.
finished
But I
fourth
think that's
in.
kind of good for Canada though, because nobody's like rolling. Like
Yeah,
nobody's like building real momentum, I don't think, of any of like the repechage teams. Because it's like, South Africa might win, or Great Britain might win, or have a good tournament, and the next tournament they stink, right?
yeah,
Unfortunately for Canada, it's been pretty low finishes consistently.
yeah. The only exception
But
was that
yeah,
performance in Cape Town, but
yeah,
that's just distant memory at this point.
yeah.
They have finished
Mm,
12th in four of the five tournaments that they've
yeah.
taken part in this year. It's clearly
Mhm.
not working at. And now, admittedly, they have been up against. I think like they had a pool of New Zealand and
Yeah.
Argentina,
I
who
mean, yeah, like there's tough
Argentina have won
pools, but
three.
yeah.
New Zealand have finished. Well, New Zealand finished silver
New Zealand
in.
or New Zealand.
Uh, Pardon?
I said New Zealand or New Zealand.
Yeah, it's
Um,
just
Yeah.
yeah.
The one thing I did enjoy like watching some of this tournament though, I think like obviously Anton Dupont kind of became the biggest story of like both
Mhm.
of them. I thought like watching like the Vancouver tournament before he even played a game was hilarious. Like they were cutting to him doing literally anything as long as he was in the vicinity of
Yeah,
the camera. It was like, it was like the how it was like the Sevens broadcast treated Anton Dupont like how like the NFL treats like Taylor Swift, which was just
yeah.
like every
That's
chance they
that's a good
get.
analogy, actually.
Yeah, every chance they get, we're gonna show Anton Dupont on the screen. And like that was kind of the reaction. I mean, it's a deserved reaction. I mean, he's the best player in the world changing codes to go win an Olympic medal on home soil. Like that's a huge story. And then obviously, and he played pretty well in Vancouver, but then I think like in LA, I feel like he kind of started to figure out sevens.
Yeah,
He started making some majestic plays. And obviously France wins their first tour stop since like 2005. And I think the rest of the sevens teams, I mean, going into the Olympics, it's like this dude is gonna be a problem for the sevens nations trying to compete for a medal. And he kind
Yeah.
of showed it, ending a 19-year long drought for France in just his second appearance. And
Yeah.
rocking the
Yeah.
number 25 too. I want to kind of know what the story is behind that or whatever. I got to admit I love seeing the that sevens is just letting people pick numbers now. It's
Yeah.
kind of fun.
Yeah, and some things to point out. Liam Bowman and Noah Flesh got their first
Yeah.
tries in sevens when they scored against the Blitzboks in their 11th place playoff in Los Angeles. Um,
Chloe Daniels got named to the dream team in LA as well.
yeah, and Chrissy Scurfield was named as the dream team for Vancouver on top of that. So, yeah, a lot, Canadians being named in the dream team, and teamwork makes the dream work. And
Which does.
yeah, um, so yeah, it's a bit of concern for like the men's side. I mean, they have now gone 10 games without winning.
Yeah.
And in
So,
the pool stage, they didn't even get a losing bonus point.
mhm.
So
But also,
it's
one
going to be
positive
pretty
thing
tough.
though, Josiah Mora had a try against New Zealand that brought him to the 300 point milestone.
Yeah.
So like shout out to him for doing that. He's been a very he's been a great player for a sevens team for a long time now. So it's cool to see him hit that milestone.
I'm just I'm obviously a bit concerned looking ahead to the elimination playoff in Madrid as well as the
Yeah, yeah, no,
um
they've been
oh,
playing
as
that.
well as the repechage tournament that'll be held in I believe
It's
Monaco.
tough to not be concerned about a team
Yeah.
finishing 12th in the.
Yeah. It also doesn't help looking at the standings and you're seeing like another and then Great Britain who are currently ninth. They're actually 1 point behind the USA, so that'll be an interesting battle to see who gets where in the men's tournament because it's very close. Canada are currently on 12 points and 12 points behind Samoa, who are 11th. So it is
Sevens is
not
wild
looking
though,
good.
man. I mean, I know we're all kind of thinking about the Olympic tournament for both and I'm sure a lot of other countries have their eyes on that Olympic repechage tournament as well. Only one team is going through for both the men and the women, right? And it's like it is one of those things where it's like sevens when it really does come down to it might be the most random sport on the planet in the sense that it's a 14-minute total game and
Hmm.
like literally like one bad bounce and your Olympic dream could be over or whatever.
Yeah.
Like it's got a lot going on there's a lot that can happen and like anybody can win, right? And it's like there's a reason why Great Britain and like especially South Africa are in the repechage too, right? Is because they
Hmm.
got upset in a 14-minute game where anything can happen, right? Like it doesn't take much. You're off your game for 14 minutes and then that's it, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a very small window that you have to like go out and execute at the best of your ability. And when it really
Hmm.
does come down to it, when it gets to those single elimination games or like in a repechage tournament, anything can happen. But I think we do want to see like with the last couple tournament stops here, it's like it'd be nice to see the men's team, building a little bit towards that tournament
Yeah.
instead of, constantly finishing 10th, 11th, 12th.
Yeah. And if anyone's wondering who are the teams that are currently lining up to be as in the Challenger Series for um the playoff in Madrid. There's three events in the Challenger Series that are taking place this year. One has already happened. That is the Dubai Challenger Series, and currently the top four are Kenya, Chile, Uruguay, and Germany. And this coming weekend will be the second round of the Challenger Series, and that has taken place in Montevideo in Uruguay between the 8th and the 10th of March. So yeah, we'll should hopefully then have a better understanding of which teams are going to be making that playoff round. And yeah, definitely one to look out for when that comes about.
Hmm.
All right. we've been talking about Canada in the United States. Let's talk about some other Canadians in the United States because, as we said, it is the return of Major League Rugby in the 2024 season,
Yeah.
and we've had the opening round, all 12 teams taking part. Looking at the off season, it didn't seem like the league would be able to get to this point, but obviously, thankfully, things have come together. We've had three new teams, all have their first games, which include Miami, and Anthem, and Los Angeles. So let's get over the games quickly. You know, New season, you want to start off, you want to have a game that grabs the attention of everyone and says, this is the sport and this is what we do. And you know what really sets that off? Have only scoring 6 points in the first hour.
Yeah,
Yeah,
not the not exactly. What do you always say? Game for the purist.
game for the purists.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
that I would have said that if it had finished 6-0.
yeah,
However, New Orleans, as hosts, were able to turn it around, getting a few penalties and a couple of tries, setting off their season as they mean to go on, which I'm sure will be more tries earlier in the game as well. But baby steps. We'll get there. Yeah, I think DC were, especially towards the end, they got bit overconfident, a bit sloppy in their performance. Nola on the other hand, had been sloppy all game and then finally put two and two together and were able to link things up. I think there was an aversion to kicking. Obviously, this is watching it on the broadcast, and Nola's camera work is odd at best. So, weren't able to tell like what the weather was like, what the humidity was that was affecting players. It also felt like some of the guys were just a bit stiff in their performance. Callum Botcher came on for Nola as
first
well in
MLR
the
cap.
second, his first MLR cap.
Yeah,
Yeah. So Tyler Rowland and Graydon Bowd. I forgot that Jason Robinson had come back to
come back. Yeah,
DC, and I was like, why
oh,
isn't
yeah.
why isn't Bowd kicking?
I,
But yeah,
so that's kind of the interesting thing with that too. Like, obviously Roland played really well in this game. Actually, he had a he sorry, Roland played really well in this game. He was like one of his team's leading tacklers, and is decent at decent set piece and everything. I thought Roland was pretty good. Graydon Bowd, though, kind of interesting. The only domestic fly half that actually started a game or started the game in the MLR this opening weekend.
Mm,
Which obviously means that there's no American fly halves in MLR. So USA Eagles,
yeah,
good luck figuring that one out. But also like for Canada, yeah, good luck figuring that one out. It is kind of very interesting seeing like MLR teams now that we're on year 7. It seems like the fly half spot is a spot that basically everybody goes to use an import slot on. So Graydon Bowd being right now the only domestic fly half, I think is very noteworthy, right? And teams. We'll get into a little bit of chat about the domestic and import slots that
yeah,
teams can use a little bit later, but it's definitely a noteworthy thing, and I think much like I'm curious to see how it'll play out for Old Glory because I think like last year San Diego having Will Hooley as a domestic 10, I think really helped them open up other possibilities that they can do in their lineup by not using a import slot on a spot that basically everybody uses import slot. Hopefully DC is able to benefit with that from Bowd. But I thought Bowd played a pretty decent game to start. I think DC kind of would probably want a couple plays here and there back from that one, but decent start for both of them. And the new DC kits looking lovely red and white colors. It's great. That's a lot of fun. Picking up a different flag from North America vibes now, but
yeah.
good on DC.
All right. Well, we start with an Eastern game. Let's move to a Western one. And we had Houston hosting Utah.
Hmm.
Yeah, Utah had a number of Canadians in the lineup. and on the bench as well, which is always great to see. Spencer Jones scoring a try for the Warriors as well. Fantastic. Now, Houston have made the categorical error of not having any Canadians in the squad. So we had to basically ensure they had an honorary Canadian, which is our Talatazi Tazi
Who
is
was
listed.
unreal.
Fantastic. Well, he
Unreal
man
in
of the
this
match
game.
performance.
Oh,
So
yeah, he had the man of the match performance. He led his team in tackles, scored the match-winning try. That intercept, my God,
yeah.
like a book. Like sorry, I don't know, like sorry, Joel Hodgson, but like you just handed that one to him. Um,
Yeah.
that was like such a phenomenal intercept try. And obviously ran it all the way in, and he, like I said, he played really well, man. He was making tackles, he was hitting breakdowns. He got line breaks, he was springing up teammates through holes. Pretty much a perfect game from Tutalatasi Tassi, and it's really like, he was always really good for the Arrows. Um, and I it was really nice to see him excel in his first game back. Great to see Jones get a try too. So many Canadian tries
Mm.
scored, or so many Canadian tries scored in this opening weekend, which we'll continue to get to the more we kind of go through this. But it was kind of great to see. And I mean, I know, like, seeing Tassie kind of score that try was awesome. I just had like the biggest smile on my face when he scored it, because one, he's on my fantasy team. Shout out Fantasy Ruckers. He's on the fantasy team, so I did enjoy that a lot. But also, like, now that there is no arrows, it's like I don't really have like an allegiance to any of these teams. I'm just kind of,
Yeah, I
I'm
get
gonna
that.
see where the vibes go if I end up picking another favorite team. But like, one of those things is like, I was kind of, I think over, December and January, I think when I was thinking about the MLR, I was kind of like, you know, am I going to be like as passionate or as into it as I was when there was the arrows? And in all honesty, Tassie's try was the one that I was kind of like, oh yeah, no, I still completely love this league. Because it's like, man, I'm not like, there is no arrows, but it's like, I don't know, man. Throughout the opening weekend here, I had a good time cheering for the guys, the former Arrows,
Mm.
seeing what they did, seeing where the guys that would have been on the team in 2024 ended up. Tassie's try kind of solidified that. It's it's super weird seeing some of these guys not in Arrows jerseys. We talked about Tyler Rowland.
Yeah.
Like, we'll get into the games later, but like Lucas Rumball, Mitch Richardson being, day one Toronto Arrows, seeing them in their new colors, it's super weird, man. It was super weird. I'm not gonna lie,
Yeah.
but like, knowing that they're all still kind of in the league kicking around, it's fun to, kind of cheer for those guys that did used to be Arrows. And the Tassie try, I think, really kind of kicked off that feeling of emotion and for me. And I'm glad to see that the some of the other lads kind of kept that
Mm.
going too. But yeah, like, I don't know. I think that's just kind of where I'm at as far as fandom now, is just like cheer for the guys that used to play for the Arrows.
Yeah.
As you said, once an arrow, always an arrow, arrows up, all
Hmm.
that fun stuff. And that Tassie try was unreal. Also, Sabercats jerseys on the actual players, phenomenal. The yellow, the collars look great. Last names, I think I'd rather have it above the number, but they still look really good.
Yeah. Okay, now we move over to the originals of the West Coast rivalry
Yep.
between Seattle and San Diego.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, Seattle, they only had one Canadian on the bench.
MLR debut for Reed.
Yes, Reed Davis,
Oh.
getting his first start in MLR. Fantastic. And then, uh, interesting, it looked as though San Diego had 11 foreign players in their squad because Blair Cowan, born in New Zealand, but played for Scotland.
Right.
So he's a Scottish player. So he's technically foreign. So how come there's 11 foreign players when San Diego only has 10 slots?
Yeah.
Well, it turns out that Blair Cowan's grandmother is Canadian,
Sweet.
and Cowan hasn't played for Scotland since November of 2020, which means he's completed the 3-year stand down period.
Yeah,
So he is technically Canadian eligible and therefore a domestic player.
love it. It's so funny. Um, yeah, like I honestly I kind of love this for multiple reasons. I mean, first, it's I guess Blair Cowan's Canadian. Cool. So we're gonna cheer for him. I mean, he is 37 years old. I'm not exactly foreseeing him getting a
Yeah. If
cap
he
with
does get called
Canada
up,
anytime.
something horrifically wrong has
Yeah, like I'm
happened.
not foreseeing that. Like, I mean, he is 37 years old. He's a great player. Will do great in the MLR and stuff, but it'd be cool to have him like as part of like the coaching staff or something if that's what he's like into. Maybe opening up
Yeah,
that
that's
doors or get him around like camp or something. But like
yeah.
I think Rugby Canada is at a point where it's like we should be focusing on younger players. So I'm not really foreseeing Blair Cowan getting actually playing a game for Canada, but it is kind of
Mhm.
cool that he is Canadian. Um, and then the other thing I kind of love, Danny Lee, head coach of San Diego. This
Mhm.
is just like some serious 4D chess masterclass, how to
Yes.
manage an MOR team stuff right here. As we did kind of mention a few moments ago, the way, like, let's be honest, it is a North American league. We all
Hmm.
want North American players to be developed well, but all the teams put a very significant value of importance on
Hmm.
their international slots and how they use those international slots.
Hmm.
And, like even a team like New England, it's like we'll talk about how, they have so many Canadians on those teams, but at the same time, some of their biggest players are guys like Conradi, are guys like Poland, Patros,
Hmm.
Waka, who are all import players, right?
Yeah.
And it goes the same for San Diego as well, right? And every team in MLR needs to use their import players well because it does give you, I think it does genuinely give you a little bit of an edge. And I think Danny Lee through this is kind of showing that those new World Rugby eligibility rules, right?
Hmm.
Real nice loophole in the rules now. It's like you can go and get guy. When was the last time Nanu played for like? Well, I guess you'd have to have a grandparent or something, right? So I guess
Yeah.
you can't really. So I guess that doesn't necessarily work. So scratch the Nanu thought, but like
Yeah.
if
But I
like
get your point
yeah,
of
like
like
I
if someone
wonder
has a
you can
grandparent
like
and
this opens up like if other teams start doing this, like this opens up a wide like range of possibilities if you can go out and find, players from other countries that maybe haven't even had test caps in a while, but it's like, oh, like you have a Canadian grandparent or you have an American grandparent and can come over because it's like realistic, like you said, it's like he's born in New Zealand, grew up in New Zealand, plays for Scotland, right? And
yeah.
now counts as a Canadian. Like San Diego effectively has an extra import slot because Blair Cowan's grandma is Canadian.
Yeah.
Right? And now that they can use a Scottish capped player as a domestic player. It's like honestly is unbelievable lineup management from San Diego, who, as I kind of mentioned with Will Hooley last year, I think kind of San Diego, they had a domestic 8-man, they had a domestic 10, right? And I think that really gave them an edge over the course of the entire season because those are traditionally positions that, teams have to use import slots on, which meant that they were using import slots on other positions, which I think kind of gave them a little bit of flexibility in their lineup and, helped allow
Mm.
them get as far as they did and have the season that they had, making it to the final. But so it's like it is kind of interesting. My other side, so like it's interesting the possibilities that can happen. My other side thought though is this happened with a few lineups this week, right?
Mm.
And shout out to Brian Ray of America's Rugby News, right,
Yeah.
for kind of doing, that
Doing the
pretty,
legwork, doing the
yeah,
research, getting the
exactly.
answers.
And
Much
figuring out,
appreciated.
yeah, exactly. Figuring out where, like, which players actually are. And this brings me to another point. Like, I know like America's Rugby News obviously does do this on their website. They put the little like brackets I, brackets D to, indicate domestic and international players, right? The MLR also needs to start doing this from from like the league accounts and the league sources. We had like the last 2 weeks have been like the MLR's own accounts, their social media, their websites, the team websites and stuff themselves, like announcing what everybody's final lineup is. The league has to identify who is domestic and who's international, like publicly, because as like with this weekend proved, it's like your fans, MLR fans and stuff, like the fans aren't stupid. Like they're gonna be like, hey, that San Diego lineup looks illegal based on the rules, right? So why is this lineup being allowed? And again, shout out to Brian Ray for reporting and finding out that Blair Cowan's got a Canadian grandmother. But it's that's that is really critical information for like I think fans and stuff to have, right? For like a variety of reasons. It does kind of impact the actual enjoyment of the game a little bit because it's like it is weird to like see teams putting out lineups and then having fans be like, well, it looks like they have an extra like import player. They look like, right. And then finding out it's like, oh, this guy has got a Canadian grandparent. This guy's got an American grandparent. This guy's, mom was born in Los Angeles or wherever.
Mm.
Right. And it's like, that's all information that's like would be private to the player, right? Because it's like, I don't know where everybody's grandparents are born. Why would I ever know that? But if it impacts, like what we just said with San Diego, how you construct your lineup and stuff, like that's something that the league needs to communicate too. So I'm just saying I would like to see like official league sources when you like putting out lineups and things like that, like identifying which
Yeah.
players are the actual import players, right? Because honestly, like this is something that shouldn't really be happening or whatever. I don't think it should be happening. I think it should be like transparent to like the fan base. Same with like things like injuries and stuff, right?
Hmm.
Especially like as the league wants to get into fantasy, the league wants
Yeah.
to encourage gambling. People have been mentioning that some more gambling sites are picking up MLR. Like you need information, right, to properly partake in these types of activities surrounding the league. So I don't know. That's kind of my little mini rant is just that it shouldn't be hard to figure out who the import and domestic players are. The team
Yeah.
should be identifying them when they announce them as a signing or when they announce the full roster that they have. Every team
Yeah.
should be identifying who counts as an import or a domestic player.
I will say, like, I know the Arrows used to do this, is that when they would sign players and they would say, like, oh, this player, even though they were like grew up in
Yeah.
England, it was like, oh, but they were born in Toronto, so they're a domestic player. Or, for like Nick
Yeah.
Ben, for example, it's like, oh, his parents are from BC or Ottawa. I forget where, but
But
basically Canadian, and therefore it's like, oh, he's a domestic player.
yeah, like
Um,
and I like
yeah,
that, but it's like the thing is though, is it's like I can expect like, players that don't have international caps for another country to
yeah.
like this like Blair Cowan. I think the thing that is kind of stands out the most, obviously World Rugby has new eligibility rules, right? But
Hmm.
Blair Cowan is a player that has international caps for another country, right? You have to like San Diego needs to be like, yeah, this guy's a domestic player, right? When
Hmm.
they put out their lineup, because what not everybody knows Blair Cowan's family's history. Why would they be expected to? But also, yeah, just based on the fact that he literally has 20 caps for Scotland, would seem to indicate that he wouldn't be domestic eligible.
Yeah.
So, like, when you have a player like that, the teams should have to identify just to be like, hey, just so you know, like, this guy is actually Canadian eligible now, right? New eligibility rules from World Rugby, but also like through his, his what do you call that? The family tree or whatever, right?
Yeah.
Um, that he is Canadian eligible, so therefore is going to count as a domestic player. Because the fact that we're talking about a guy that has 20 caps for Scotland being
Hmm.
domestic 6 years ago, that would not be happening in it,
Yeah.
right? But
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's
That's like my
something.
little mini rant. I just want
Yeah, it's something
the
that can
leagues
be
to
looked at
identify these
in the future.
guys.
Okay.
But shout
Well,
out to Brian Ray for actually doing the work and finding all these random, you know, parental lineage that a handful of players had that people were noticing the lineups didn't exactly check out.
mm. All right. Well, we've talked about the Saturday games. Let's move over to the Sunday games. We were talking about last week with Lucas Rumble,
So
Miami versus Chicago. How do you face a team that has never played before? How
yeah,
do you prepare for that? Turns out you let them commit penalty tries, and
yeah.
then
Do a
and
rain
that and
dance.
that's how you win.
Do a
Yeah,
rain dance before the
that.
game.
Yeah, absolutely tipping it down
Yeah.
at
I
Drive Pink Stadium. Well, technically the ground next to it, but you know what I mean. Yeah, I think that because if you go onto the official stats of the game, only
I
Miami
know.
scored a try.
World Rugby or Major League Rugby's website is very weird with penalty tries.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just like, I think like based on it was very kind of interesting watching this game too, because of our chat with Lucas Rumball last week, where like when we were asking him about like what the Hounds have been focusing on, what they want their style of play to be, right? He obviously dropped the like have that dog in us line, right? Which obviously the Chicago Hounds seem to be loving the whole dog
Mhm.
theme, right? But he mentioned that, and he also talked about the set piece and how the set piece was like an area that they look to improve, right? And obviously, in their pack, they made some big additions. Lucas Rumball, Mason Flesh were two of them. Dylan Fawcett, who is obviously the one of the most prolific try scorers in MLR history, largely because of what he can do at the set piece. And, I think if that's an area that Sam Harris and his team were identifying to be like, we need to improve this, this has got to be a pretty great game for them to, kind of build that confidence with the set piece. Their scrum looked really good. And dominant for most of the game. And then, they got the lineup was solid, but also they earned two penalty tries through that set piece at the lineout. And even though nobody actually dotted those tries down, right? The penalty tries obviously still count for 7 points, right? So it I think they did a really good job of that. They were also, just to go with that dog mentality that Rumball was talking about. Rumball and Flesh, I thought were both very good in this game too. Flesh was making got a lot of carries, got a lot of opportunities with ball in hand, making hard meters. Rumball tackles, carries, good at the breakdown, typical Lucas Rumball game. And right, and I thought it was I thought it was a pretty good outing for them. Jason Higgins coming off the bench, so a lot of Canadians there. Um, Miami had Oideman and Dutoit come off the bench. O'Leary started at 15. Everybody kind of played some solid game there. Right. It kind of I don't know. I feel like Miami wants to be like a fast running rugby team, just kind of based on who their players are and what they seem to be trying to do in this game. I don't know if the weather allowed it. I think the weather kind of helped Chicago out a little bit in this one. Because I feel like they're more inclined to be like physical, hard working, like muddy team. Whereas I think Miami's play style and stuff and the guys that they kind of got there, I think they really want to play that fast paced running rugby, which will probably be great for Miami in the summer when it doesn't rain.
Mhm.
But I don't know. That was kind of my first impression of Miami. It kind of seemed like that's what they
Mm.
wanted to do anyways.
Yeah, and then we had probably the most mismatched confrontation of the weekend. New Boys Anthem RC up against the defending champions, the New England Free Jacks. And yeah, pretty conclusive victory for the Free Jacks. They got their bonus point, I think, by the half-hour mark.
Yeah.
And
I
but
think,
fair play to Anthem. They were still in it. They still
yeah, they got
had that fight in them. Eventually did get a try out of it. The final score, Anthem 13, New England 46.
Yeah.
Great performances by Lesage, Quatrin. We also had like
Two
Larson and
tries
Dewitt
each.
doing, yeah.
Yeah.
Did Quatrin get one or two? I know Lesage got two, and
I'm
on the
yeah,
broadcast it looked like Quatrin got two, but
Watchman
then
got two, but yeah, I know the MLR website says something different, but
yeah,
I don't
so
know. We're the Canadian bias podcast though, so I'm
yeah,
talking
so we say Quatrin got
100%
two,
Watchman had
Lesage
two.
got two,
Yeah, Reese
lot
McDonald's also Canadian, so that we're going to claim
yeah.
that for no reason.
um
It's like I don't know. He plays for the Free Jacks. You're half Can. You have to be half Canadian
yeah.
to play for the Free Jacks, anyways, right? So
Yeah,
we're gonna claim that try, I think too. But yeah, Larson, Dewitt were all really good. I kind of
uh,
like the light show in when Anthony
yeah.
scores a try. That's fun. I don't know
They
how
need to do
that's.
that more.
Yeah, I know they need
More
to kind of
tries,
start
more
tries. Yeah, I
yeah.
don't know. It's kind of a weird game. Like I don't know. I feel like we didn't really learn much from this game.
Yeah,
It's
it
like
felt as though it was
it went
like I say,
exactly
like
how everyone thought it would go. It was going to be
yeah,
the best team in the league last year, the defending champions, just ran
yeah, against a team
over
of
a development team.
yeah, essentially a lot of guys from other teams' academies, and yeah, you do have some like
Yeah,
international players in there just to, like boost up the
but even like
numbers.
there's like a handful like guys like Waito Kia weren't playing. You
Yeah,
know what I mean? Like there's some bigger guns that um like Anthem seems like they might have at their disposal that also weren't in this lineup. It's just
yeah,
yeah, I mean I hope every Anthem game doesn't look like this, but
no, well,
it's like yeah,
yeah.
they just kind of the
I
MLR
think they
scheduler
just need to
kind
find
of
their feet and up
yeah,
against the strongest team in the
strongest
East
team,
last
yeah.
year
And like I mean
isn't really a fair measuring stick.
no, yeah. I mean, it's probably great for New England. Everybody gets their feet wet and stuff. A couple of those Reese McDonald tries were electric too. Conradi looked good. Poch, like they all looked good, right?
That is
Lesage,
true.
yeah, Lesage obviously, was great too. Larson was solid. Like they all like they look good, so it's like they get a little extra run out. But yeah, like I don't know, it's the MLR scheduler kind of fed Anthem to the wolves on this one. Welcome to the league, boys.
Yeah. And then we get into the final game of the weekend, Los Angeles versus Dallas.
The best
I
game.
caught the beginning of this, and this was just as Ko was scoring his first try of the
Yeah.
match. Fantastic play, great to see Ko.
The second try was better though.
Yeah.
That kick from
Um,
Emery, oh,
yeah,
that was
crossfield,
money. It looks
picks
like they
up,
played
down.
together before, right?
You want to talk about try scorers?
I know that this game was
Yeah.
great for the Canadian content, man.
Yeah, Dewald Kotze getting three tries.
Yeah, Quatsi had a
First
hat trick.
Canadian hat trick. Brock Gallagher getting his first cap. Nick Ben getting his second MLR cap.
Yeah,
And his shoulder doing much better than the first cap he got.
forgot the Richardson try as well. Mitch
Oh
Richardson.
yeah, Mitch Richardson. But yeah, this was a incredibly close game.
Yeah.
And then Matt Heaton couldn't bring
Dude,
his
LA
feet
had
together.
so many yellows in this game, man.
Yeah,
Like
they had
I
four yellows.
like
You are basically down to
yeah.
14 players for half the game.
Yeah, that's gonna be like I don't know what that film session is gonna be like this week, but discipline is gonna be up there because I mean they kind
Yeah.
of they showed that they can score some tries, right? It's
Yeah.
like, obviously a big core of that team, like we keep talking about them being a new team, but a big core of that team is still
ATL. Yeah.
ATL, right? So it's ATL with a few new additions. New additions were looking good.
Yeah.
Co was phenomenal for them.
Yeah.
Both like it obviously scored two highlight reel tries. But I mean that kick from Emery where Cole like catches it in stride. It was like
Mhm.
that's setting the bar. That's the bar that you got to clear for a try of the year candidate now. You got to beat that one. Reese McDonald held that distinction for a good 4 hours. So
Yeah.
until Andrew Cole played. Dallas though, like set piece looking unreal.
Yeah.
Walking in, three tries for Kotze. Mitch Richardson's try was off of a lineout maul as well, except the maul was brought down just before the line. So one pass out to Richardson, who was able to finish that. Right.
Yeah,
So it's like, but it's still like the Maul basically created 4 tries um for Dallas, which again, discipline thing, because that's how you get line out mauls is when other teams take time.
exactly. Yeah,
Touch.
and
So
yeah.
like,
So
that's a big problem for LA looking through.
yeah, I think as well it's because with Miami and with Miami has like a lot of new guys coming in, who are getting their first MLR caps.
Yeah.
You can be like, okay, there's first game jitters and stuff like that. So that, but with LA is that
It's a new
it
environment.
doesn't
It's still a new
it's a
city.
new environment, but it's guys who have been playing in this league for a couple of years at least. And I don't know, I think I was more disappointed with LA's indiscipline than Miami's, but
Yeah. But I
that's
mean,
just me.
like, shout out to Dallas though for like making them pay for it too. Like
Oh yeah, as in like
in
Dallas is
every sense of
fine.
the word. But like, yeah, Kotze though, like Kotze had a freaking unreal game too, though. He had his 3 tries. He was one of the team's leaders in carries. Had 10 carries, 43 meters. Again, according to the Major League Rugby website. So real strong, like kind of unreal game
Mhm.
for him. We're going to ignore the fact that Matt Heaton was one of the guys that got that yellow card. But like generally, like really solid game from like all the Canadians in Dallas's lineup as well.
Yeah.
Shout out to them. Stu, I do have like a random fun piece of trivia for you if you want to try your
All right.
some trivia knowledge here.
Yeah, go for it.
So Andrew Coe became the the sixth Canadian to score the first try in a franchise's history. Can you name the other 5?
In a franchise's history,
First game for a team,
first game for a team.
or not necessarily the first game, but this was the first
Yeah,
try for a team.
first try. Okay, John Moonlight.
John Moonlight, yeah, Toronto versus NOLA, first
Mm,
game. Or excuse me, yes, John
Yeah.
Moonlight, first try for Toronto, game against NOLA.
Um, can I at least have the team names?
Well, I mean, that's less fun.
Yeah, yeah.
You gotta get at least one more, and then I'll start giving you team names.
Okay. How many in the sorry, how many teams in the East? How many in the West?
Uh, West, East, East, West. Two and
West,
two.
East. Two in the East, two in the West.
Two in the East, two in the West.
Uh oh.
Here, I'll give you. Okay, here I'll give you a
Yeah.
hint. Only one
Yeah.
of the four play of the only one of the 4 remaining players is actually still playing.
Okay.
That'll be my first hint.
Doug Fraser.
Doug Frazier, Old Glory, yes,
Yes.
versus Nola. Nola's getting a rough ride on this one, in all honesty. But
Um okay, that's East. Uh
think about the first year in MLR, a team that had a lot of Canadians on them. Hey,
Seattle.
uh,
Sis Duro?
nope.
Okay.
Starts with
Is
the
it
same letter though.
D?
Again, I remember that I said they're not actually playing. This guy's not one of the guys that's not actually playing in the league anymore.
Yeah, that's the thing. I'm trying because like obviously a lot of players have called time since 2018, so
Yeah,
it's
but not many of them led the league in scoring.
uh oh my God, I'm just drawing blanks at the
Person.
moment.
Oh my goodness. You got to get this one. This is not the one I thought you would be tripped up on.
No, to be honest, when you said that, oh, they're no longer playing, I'm like going through the list of guys that are no longer.
The other team that has a guy that no longer is playing is the LA Guiltinis.
DTH, the
DTH,
Merva.
yes, all right, got that one. Okay, we're kind of rolling.
All right.
The other player is still playing. Actually, Andrew Coe's teammate right now. His team may have moved from across the country.
Oh, I'm still in Seattle. Brock Stoller.
Brock Stoller, yeah, there we go. We got there. See, I just had to juggle your brain a little bit, get you thinking of something else. You got one more guy. The one active player that is left, other than Coe. but he plays with Andrew Coe. We literally just talked about him 3 minutes ago for Rugby ATL.
Matt Heaton.
Matt Heaton, yeah, he got the first try for Rugby ATL.
All right, I got
Hey,
there.
you got there. You got there. It took a little bit of work, but you got there.
To me, I thought one of them was going to be like a trick question of like, oh, it's
Oh,
Andrew Coe again because he did it for New
no,
York,
yeah,
but
no trick question.
that's why it's like, oh, fifth. Oh, I meant sixth. Is
Yeah. Yeah. No, it wasn't that. So either way, there has been 17 teams that have played in Major League Rugby now
hmm
over the course of the time. So six of them have had their first try scored by a Canadian, which is 35% of all MLR teams have had their first try scored by a Canadian.
That
Is
is an interesting
Yeah, that is a
fact.
fact that is only cool to this podcast. Everywhere
And to
else,
all our
completely,
lovely listeners
yeah,
and viewers.
everywhere else, completely irrelevant. Maybe that'll win you some bar trivia one day. How many Canadians have scored the first try for a team in MLR?
All right. Okay, then let's move from the United States back to Canada because we have a few announcements. For example, the Quebec Ontario Rugby Championship dates have been announced for games. There will be 6 rounds over 2 phases, with the first phase taking place between March 31st and April 27th, and then the entirety of phase two between May 4th and May 25th. And these will, so of the 6 rounds of games, they will start with inter-provincial games, so Quebec East versus Quebec West and Ontario West versus Ontario East, and they will conclude with the reverse fixtures. Everything in between is going to be a mix between Ontario and Quebec, and so that's going to be really interesting. There still hasn't been any announcement of dates or the announcement of locations for these dates.
Mhm.
They just said that games in Quebec, between Quebec, will be hosted there, and in Ontario will be hosted there. And then it's just alternating weekends. So both Quebec and Ontario teams, East and West, they will play double headers, it appears. And yeah, when the finals will be held on June the 1st in Montreal. That is all the information we are given. So
Looking
we
forward to
will
that
yet to
whole
see.
tournament.
And something a bit closer to home is, interestingly, the Arrows Academy posted on Instagram a photo including the logo and Jamie Cudmore and Noel Reed as well,
Yeah,
saying the caption says, "We've been working in the background, but stay tuned for more details on the upcoming 2024 season for the Academy. Until then, we're running open training sessions with these coaches for athletes U16 to U23, and it includes like the Burlington Dome
yeah.
and the
The coaches are
Redeemer Sports Complex."
the coaches are Jamie Cudmore and Noel Reed that are in the picture too.
Yeah.
Like it's um I would honestly I would love to see like a high performance team in Toronto still. If
Yeah.
that's if we're gonna call it the Arrows Academy, like that's awesome. Like it's great to see that people are still trying to make something work as far as a high
Yeah,
performance team. Like I don't
and
know how that works without
yeah, well,
with the
that's the thing.
I don't know, do they have to
So
change the name or something at some
So
point? Like I
I
don't
don't. So nothing's really come from this post anyway. It
yeah.
seems that they may be changing their name down the line. I mean,
Yeah.
their bio still says "Future Toronto Arrows" starts here, which
Yeah,
you know
I'm not
maybe not, but
I don't know, it'd be interesting to like
yeah.
talk
So
figure
yeah,
out.
coaching sessions with Noel Reed, Jamie Cudmore, Shane Carhill as well, and part of the Arrows Junior Academy, which seems, I don't know if that's the same thing or
I'm
different from.
Yeah, like I don't know. It is obviously interesting. I'm all for anybody trying to, keep some sort of high performance rugby alive in
Yeah.
Southern Ontario here.
Yeah,
The one thing
remember
that
when
would be
the
great though is if they can somehow unearth whatever the Arrows kit would have been this year and rock that as their
I think
cool.
there's going to be a more prominent red kit,
Yeah,
but
those are those jerseys made because that would be fun.
yeah, well, remember
Honestly, I just
that.
want to see what they look like.
Remember that the Atlantic Privateers, when they were doing their rebrand, said they were going to be hosting the Coast to Coast Cup and wanted to include the Arrows Academy or whatever
Yeah,
inclination it may be. So,
it would be
sign.
great to see something continue in Southern Ontario, as Arrows Academy here.
Mhm.
But like it would be great to see something continue in Southern Ontario.
Yeah.
I mean, it's cool that like the Highlanders have their thing going out in BC, the Privateers. It's like that like elite level of rugby that maybe sits just below the MLR or whatever is
Yeah.
something that I think is really needed. Um, and I mean, it is sad that the Arrows are no longer in MLR and that they had to fold.
Mm. Yeah.
That's obviously sad, but it's like it's good to see that it doesn't look like that's stopping like people from trying to do what they can do to continue like high performance rugby in Canada
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
help continue to develop these programs. I hope the Arrows Academy does continue, even if they eventually have to call it something else. I have no idea how that works from a legal point of view, but
Mhm.
because like they are using like the new logo, which is like the rebrand colors. So I mean,
Yeah. So,
um,
I mean, it's going to be interesting
so
to see how this all comes together, but we'll
I just
just
hope
have
there is
to
something.
see
That's
what
all it
happens.
is, really. I just hope there is something.
Yeah, and you mentioned the Vancouver Highlanders, so we're going to end just talking about their new signings and their reserve squad. So
Mm,
they have announced on their reserve squad they have signed Simeon John, who is actually from Barbados, Tane Clegg as part of their reserve squad, and for their signings they have announced Caden Wilson, Alistair Marshall, and Jake Thiel, who has decided to step away from the Canada Sevens program and is going to be playing for the Vancouver Highlanders this year, which is really interesting. So it's also been announced that the Rugby Players Challenge Summer Series is to take place this upcoming summer, and unfortunately, we're recording on the 4th of March. And from what I've gathered, they are going to be announcing some, if not all, of their opponents on the 5th. I'm not going to spoil anything. Obviously, this comes out afterwards. But I have been told it's going to be, a few select teams, a bit teams with a bit of international flair to them. But for all the information for the Vancouver Highlanders, you can find that on their social media posts. And the summer series, we're gonna get dates hopefully. As I said, it's gonna be between I believe it was like April and August.
yeah,
Um, for that summer series. Obviously, that's going to be a while, but until then, you can watch rugby this coming weekend. We have the final two rounds of the Six Nations on the Zone. If you want to watch any MLR games, you can do so on the Rugby Network, as well as any Premiership Women's Rugby that is on there. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more, as well as our written pieces on our website, therougerugby.ca. You can also find us on Spotify, S4P, and Apple Podcasts. On our YouTube channel, we have episodes of the podcast as well as extra interviews with players and coaches. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. Speaking of which, we're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Threads, all at the Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can the fine people find you?
at Brissette the Jet across all social media platforms.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, Derek, thank you for joining me for this episode, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.